What's
Jamie.
going on, Bart? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Nothing. I was actually getting changed in to go work out when I saw a very interesting discussion in your chat about, uh, you know, typical stuff. Bankroll. What do you need for bankroll when you're playing certain stakes? And some guy said, if you're a good player, you should never go on downswing of more than three or four buy-ins, and that just kind of triggered me a little bit. Uh,
Well, you can guess what I want to talk to you about. Can you guess?
yes, I can.
Okay.
Most likely Stone,
Uh,
Hostile,
so
an alleged cheating scandal.
what's really interesting here, so I'm not just talking at myself because I'd like to talk to you or talk to someone that's obviously familiar with the situation because obviously you were up there at the time that this broke, right? I remember Tuckman
Yeah,
was
yeah,
about
I
to
was
go
on
up
the
there,
stream.
and
Yeah,
Trooper
yeah,
was up
I
there
was there.
too, which was kind of funny too because he
Yeah,
doesn't usually appear on
yeah.
these types of things. I just can't.
No, and the fact, a little backstory there. I'll give you a really quick backstory. The reason Trooper was there was because I introduced Trooper to Justin Creditas, JFK, at the World Series that year, and hooked those two up and begged Trooper to. I said, dude, you need to do this live stream. This place Stones is awesome. JFK is awesome. Good people. You need to come up there. And he said, are you going to be there? And I said, dude, if you show up to Stones, I'll be there. And
So
so that's why we were there.
well, I couldn't, I put out a tweet saying like, "Hey, will the World Series at least say that they won't hire Justin Curatus?" Because I couldn't, but then I couldn't remember if he was actually worked the World Series this past summer or the year before, but it was the last summer,
It was
and
2018. No,
2000,
19, 2019.
Okay, so he did work
Right.
the World Series. Listen, like I'm not a guy that I don't want to, whatever cancel culture, pitchforks. I don't really want to get into
Me either.
that. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't.
Me
I
either.
kind of even felt like a little bit weird, like sending the tweet out, but I was like, well, I think if it brings awareness to it, here's the thing that that is just like beyond sort of shocking to me. I mean, it's beyond belief, right? Is that he's waiving this sort of settlement. He's waiving this plaintiff settlement, which basically doesn't really admit to anything. It just says that the people that signed it, well, of course, you were not one of them because you were on the thing. And
Correct. I didn't
I
sign
don't
it.
know if I mean I don't. I'm sure you don't care because
Right.
you had said you thought I was on it, and I said no, right?
Yeah.
Well, originally,
Right.
and you were
Right.
like, oh, what would you do? And I said I wouldn't sign it. And
Right.
it's not that it's not. I wouldn't have signed it because I wouldn't thought the money, which has now come out public, is really worth it to have your name on a list like this, right?
No.
And now, what does Jeff Boski
No.
look like? Apparently, right? Because he
Right.
he
I mean, you
signed
can
it.
barely. I think what you can barely buy an Xbox with that money. Like it's nothing.
Yeah, $400 or $500. So, I mean,
Right.
the settlement just basically said that they didn't find any forensic evidence, the plaintiffs, that Justin or Stones were involved with cheating. It doesn't say that there
Right.
wasn't cheating that went on. And to be honest with you, if they were smart about it or they just shut up, the thing might actually blow over. But it's incredible.
For all intents and purposes, I thought it had all died down. I thought it might spark back up when the settlement was made, but it didn't. There was very very little talk about the settlement, right? It didn't really spark back up until JFK got on Twitter. And now it's, you got Phil Galfond jumping in and a bunch of other things.
I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And it seems like JFK is also controlling the Stones Twitter too. I mean, I don't know that for sure.
Yes,
but
and
it
I don't know
certainly
for
seems
sure,
that
but
way.
I think he controlled it back in, like when the live stream was going on. I think he controlled it then. So I would assume he's controlling it now. But again, I'm just assuming.
So I mean, this is a nightmare for Stones. Like I can't even believe they haven't. I don't know if he works there, if he's still on their payroll, but you can't handle.
From what I've heard, he's never not been on their payroll.
You can't handle.
From what yeah.
Yeah, you can't handle a situation worse than this, where he's basically taking the settlement and waving it in people's faces on Twitter.
I think from a PR standpoint, it is. I would think it was a nightmare. I would think that if this happened at, for instance, a company I work for, I'd be let go immediately. Like if I did something like this. But I'm not Stones. I'm not Stones management. Maybe they have a larger plan. Maybe they're under the no publicity is good publicity type mantra. I can tell you this: there's probably about 1 billion people that have heard of Stones now that had never heard of it before.
Well, and I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show, but I said that the reason why I did that video was because, and I was going to do one of that video, a few months ago, and it sort of blew over in my head too. When I found out that the 8-9 hand that changed cards against the 8-6, when I found out that actually wasn't evidence of anything, that wasn't the smoking gun, I kind of forgot about it. And people know what I'm talking about is that, that hand, I thought that hand was a smoking gun, because whenever cards change in a live stream, when you're watching a hand and the cards change during the hand and that person's cards are down, face down on the table, face down on the felt, there's only one option of what's going on. And it's basically the card graphics person has changed the hand without actually knowing the hand, because the graphics are baked into the live feed. Like there's a 30-second delay. There's a 30-minute delay, right? So the game, let's say the game's going on live at 7 p.m. and then it goes out to the audience at 7:30. The graphics go on the feed at 7 o'clock and then they're delayed and they go out at 7:30. You can't change them in between. They're actually happening.
They're baked in.
Yeah, they're happening at the time. That's how the system works. There's an overlay. So if the graphics change in the middle of a hand and that person's still playing in the hand and the cards are face down, they're just making up what the hand is. Somebody's changing the hand. Now, what I found out, though, was that they did this all the time, that there were so many complaints about the cards being wrong, that this was not the first or the second or the third time. They had done it many times before. So it doesn't really prove anything. So once I learned that, I'm like, oh, let's just let this thing blow over. But then when Justin basically started mouthing off, now it's sort of come back to the forefront. I mean, it's just terrible. The one good thing about this has come out is that at least I think that Veronica now is in a much better place, because I think it was really hard for her the last few months.
I think it was probably hard for her the last few months. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what, just out of pure curiosity, what Phil Galfond is putting together as far as, tracking down all the stats. But I often wonder, and this is probably, a pretty unpopular take to even care, but I actually, I'm human, so I do care. I wonder what it was like. Okay, let me, when they first approached me for to sign on as a plaintiff, I almost didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And that was because I liked Justin. You've met Justin. He's a very, nice guy. I liked Mike at the beginning, but I was furious. After looking at all the footage and hearing Joey Ingram's, vlogs and his podcast or whatever, I was 100% sure something fishy was going on with Mike. That he was either, he was party to something nefarious.
Right.
With Justin, I wasn't as sure. With Justin, I was more, like you said, either he was in on it or there was just some incompetence going on there and he was just turning a blind eye to it.
Right.
Me and Justin also had a much better relationship than me and Mike. Me and Justin, Bart, actually have a very similar relationship as me and you. Like I'll call you every once in a while. We'll chit chat. We'll talk about, things not necessarily 100% poker all the time. And, then we'll go on with our lives. Me and Justin had that same kind of relationship. So I was more hurt with the Justin angle. So much so that I even recently reached out to Justin after the lawsuit, just to see if he was okay personally. Mm-hmm. Like, are you okay? He has well publicized issues with, struggling with being sober. And he did a whole blog series about him trying to maintain his sober. I was concerned with him as a person, like that he wasn't going to do something crazy, take his life, do something nutty. Right.
Yeah.
So me knowing in the back of my mind, okay, there's this lawsuit that's hanging over, the whole poker community as a whole. It's hanging over Veronica. It's hanging over Justin. Could give a shit about Mike. But I was worried about them as people first. So then I started putting myself in that place like, man, if I had this hanging over me and I couldn't speak for legal reasons for a year, let's just say, what would I do when I could speak? Would I try to be logical and just say, you know what, I'm not going to say anything? Or would that other side of me come out Let's just like, you know what? I'm just going to blast on everybody. See, I proved you, see, you guys were wrong. Like, I don't know. I'd like to say I wouldn't say anything. I'd like to say I'd still be logical, rational me, but who knows? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, somebody else brought this up that's close to this case too, and now that I think about it, there's a very high possibility it could be going down this direction where, I mean, if he's struggled with these issues, we know, for people that don't know what bipolar is like, you have like extreme ups and downs, right? Like a manic depressant, which means that you've got your times when you're super depressed, you maybe don't even see anybody come out of the house, and which is, I had sort of heard anecdotally, where he was in that state immediately after the scandal had happened. And then you're in sort of but then the opposite side of that, in an unbalanced way, when you're manic, you have these crazy delusions of grandeur, ups. And I based upon his behavior, I kind of wonder if he's in one of those types of episodes, and it's just like, whoa, dude. Like, and that's why maybe, I don't know. And I was thinking about this today. Maybe it's not it's just so egregious, right? I don't piling on to him just because I think that there's actually something's wrong here. Like no rational person could possibly act in this way. There's something else though that I want to tell you too, because you said you mentioned Phil Galfond, and obviously I spent so much time on that video, like too much time. Like it was just ridiculous. I mean, if I had known it was going to take that much time, I probably wouldn't have done it. And based upon some of the reactions from whether these are troll counts or Mike's account, Mike's friends or whatever, this kind of reminds me of almost like our sort of political situation in this country, where I don't really even know if there's a point. I mean, it's obviously nice that, sort of the godfather of poker, Phil Galfond's willing to do this, but okay, so let's say that they go through the stats and Mike never bluffed anyone when he was behind, over the course of 2,000 hours, right? Like he never bluffed into a strong hand, but he bluffed into weak hands. I'm just throwing numbers out, like 200 times.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Is that going to change anyone's mind?
I don't think so.
So I don't even know if this. I don't even know what the point is.
I think it's just an exercise. It sounds like to me it's just an exercise to do an exercise. It sounds like maybe the pendulum will switch the other way. So now the rest of the poker community can now come back at Justin and Stone saying, well, explain this, explain the stats that Phil Galfond wouldn't lie about anything. He's the nicest guy ever. Like it's just going to be an ongoing thing back and forth. The place I was coming from was the place I was coming from a year ago was where things look fishy, right? I instantly didn't jump on the bandwagon. In fact, if you go back and look at my blogs, I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if Justin did something. I don't know if Mike did something. I don't know. And we are in a society where if we don't know, if me and you, Bart, disagree on something, we can't come to a resolution, we go to a court system for them to decide who's right. Is Bart right or is Jamin right? And that's what I wanted to happen. I wanted all the evidence to be presented in court, and then mathematicians or, people present their witnesses or whatever, and then the court rules either person A is right or entity B is right. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So what's going to happen now is you're just going to have both entities going back at each other until the thing just eventually peters out.
Well, I mean, it's unfortunate that apparently, like at the state level, where it's just not really set up for that. Like you can't really have this unless you've got some sort of concrete evidence in terms of like somebody's coming out and talking, or they have some sort of physical evidence, and apparently they can't get the discovery from Stone, so they don't have to hand it over. And I sort of see Stone's side of it. Here's the thing. I know the executives at Stone's because I signed a deal with them. Okay. I don't think he's involved. I know that he had a very close relationship with Justin.
Right.
The issue is like, they can't really admit publicly that something went on because they open themselves up to liability. Okay. I get that. Right. But and the reason why I made that condensed video was for anybody that hadn't, as a refresher, or someone from outside the community that wanted to see the hands. I didn't want to allow Justin, these Postle trolls, and Stones to have a narrative that no cheating went on. Like, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? I understand we live in the real world where this could just sort of blow over and Stones can kind of, you know, put their head in the sand. They can't really admit it, but they sort of know it happened. But allowing Justin to take control of Stone's Twitter, if that happened, or allowing him to speak out the way that he is speaking out while he's still on their payroll is ridiculous. Now I really am mad at Stones. I'm mad at Stones because Justin's not being handled. You know what I mean? Like, that in itself is ridiculous. What's gone on this week is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I also think that what we are seeing as in far as looking at poker Twitter and looking all that's going on is such a small, tiny percentage of the poker population at large that 99% of people don't care. And the reason I say this is when this all was blowing up at the very, very beginning, Joey was doing 5-hour, YouTube videos every night. When all that was happening, I was in Sacramento still, right? I had to go to Stones the next day to, pick up some stuff or whatnot. And no one cared. Half the room didn't even know what was going on. Even when I go play, places now, most people they're not thinking about Postle. They might ask, oh, whatever happened to that Postle thing. But the majority of poker players, the vast majority, don't know what's going on, don't really care. It's not going to affect their 1-2 or 2-5 game in the least. But I think when you look at poker on social media, it seems much bigger than it actually is.
Well, I mean, that could be, but like I said, I also think it's a little bit of a reflection. If there actually are real people that are supporting Postle, and they might all be trolls, and it's obviously a very small subset. I think that some people, as Dan Druff on his show said, people are just being contrarian just to be contrarian, just to get a rouse out of people. Like, they don't really care, but they'll just be like, oh, there's no evidence. You know what I mean? I mean, anybody who watches my video, who knows anything about poker, can just see that there's no way that anybody can play these hands. I mean, and then I get involved sometimes when somebody's like, I watched the video, like that doesn't prove anything. And then I'll get riled up, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's probably doesn't even believe what he's saying, or he doesn't care. He's just inserting himself, into this to get a rouse out of me. But I think it's sort of a reflection of our society. And this is where I think that I don't think it's going to matter the stats that come out. It's like us versus them, kind of as a reflection of, like our political situation, how polarized we are. And for example, like Trump could do anything, right? Like, and his approval rating is basically remained steady, right? It doesn't matter what happens. It's us versus them. Like, we're going to oppose them. It doesn't matter. And I think that's the same thing here.
The difference in the political landscape is there's real world consequences one way or the other.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I know.
But here with the Phil Gal, let's just call it the Phil Galfond thing. If real numbers come out of there that make it undeniable that Postle was cheating or doing something nefarious, nothing happened. Like, nothing additional is going to happen to Postle. Justin and Stones are already, cleared legally. So, like, nothing happens. It's just that the poker community will just kind of know. And
again, I mean, just to wrap this up, it's like, well, why people, one of the common things people are saying, why do you care so much? Like, what difference? Like, it's like, why aren't we over this? And it really was because the way that Justin acted this week really is why. And probably some of it is because, you and I both know Justin personally and had a personal relationship. So it slaps a little different. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just some other industry where some nameless person you didn't know, like, this is someone you interacted with. So yeah, I think that piques my interest a little bit more. So Ross Ferger in the live chat said, Bart, didn't you suspect something was going on a year before it came out? Yeah, I had discussions with you, Jamin. Like, people had started to, there was I'm sure I can say it now because it's come. I mean, Jake, who was one of the commentators, that used to commentate with Veronica, he told me like the year before, like in November or December.
Yeah.
This is like in December of 2018. He told me, he's like, Bart, Possel's a bad reg. And he sort of like kind of gave me that look, which I interpreted like he thought something was going on, meaning that he's played with them. He played with Possel, for years. So how does a guy who's like barely break even if a losing player now all of a sudden crushes for whatever it is, $500, $600, $700 an hour? I mean, that's the other unfortunate thing too, is that this stupid argument that Rounder Life keeps making that, oh, the data's inflated, like the win rate's inflated. So it's very, very hard to actually track the actual win rate because the program feed was a mess. You know what I'm saying? The presentation was awful.
Right.
So maybe the guys that put the thing together, okay, maybe instead of him winning 320,000, he won 250,000. What difference does that make? It doesn't matter. It's such a stupid argument. And that's the only argument that they go back to. Oh, they didn't crowdsource the data beforehand. It's just so dumb. Look at the hands.
Yeah. The only thing, and again, this is hindsight is 2020, and it'd be great if we could all go back in time. But if we could go back in time and delay the announcement that there's cheating that's going on at Stones, so that he could possibly be caught red-handed,
right?
That would have been optimal. But
yeah. I mean, I think we all learn from these situations. I mean, I don't think that would have. I actually remember some people saying that at the time, and I kind of dismissed it. Like right when it came out, people were like, "Wow, they shouldn't have done it this way. They should have caught him red-handed." And I was like, "Well, it's just gonna. I mean, he's gonna get in trouble anyways." And then now in retrospect, maybe that was the way to do it. But I will say though, if I was I wouldn't have thought to do that. Now I would. You know what I mean? We learn.
Yeah, of course.
But you'd have thought that somebody would talk. Been, but
it would have been even hard to catch him red-handed looking at his phone unless he was looking at a blue screen type situation. If he was just looking at a live feed on his phone, if that's how it was being done, it'd be almost impossible to see that. Because you played on live streams where you could have your phone.
Sure.
Like everybody's looking at the live stream on their phone. So it's going to be hard to differentiate, Mike's live stream is 20 minutes different than mine. Like that would be very hard to pick out.
Well, I mean, I'd always said, and I told Live at the Bike this too when this was coming out. I told Ryan Feldman when he was still a part of Live at the Bike, I told him months before the scandal came out, I said, listen, like I'm pretty convinced that something's going on at Stones. Like, and I said the easiest way for somebody to cheat in these live streams is for somebody to go in either from the inside or just get into the room, because the room's got bullshit security, and put some sort of like Team Viewer type Trojan or whatever program that's hidden onto the GFX, onto the computer that controls the graphics. And then you just send that signal out to a third party. What I was thinking was that signal would be sent out live to a third party, and then the third party would signal into the player through whatever. You set it up like a text or something, whatever, on the phone or some other device. That's super simple, right? What I didn't know was that apparently like the GFX program, has this thing built in where if you know this IP address that can be set up in a password, you can just stream the graphics out, not on a delay to some other location. So we have the means, we know how it's done. And then also too, there's the win rate. There's the fact that he played all these hands in a ridiculously bizarre way, that he played all these hands pre-flop that we know are not profitable. And most importantly, and this is why I always go back when people are like, well, can you imagine like if somebody was smarter and actually knew what they're doing, they could just be cheating all the time. And then some people have thrown around the name Garrett, just as an example. They're like, wow, how do we know that Garrett's not cheating? And I was like, well, first of all, Garrett plays off the stream and he's still a crusher. And he has had a history of being a huge winning player. And he'll play in other locations. When you have a guy that was a losing player that suddenly crushes and only plays on the live stream, and we know that there's this ability to stream out the graphics to another location, and we know that the win rates are impossible, and we know that you can't play 7 deuce offsuit for a 4-bet, I mean, it just all adds up, right? I mean, it's just...
Right. And especially if you know this because you played on a billion live streams. Like, once the stream is off and the cameras go off,
Yeah.
the game typically gets even better. Like, you know, because some people are stuck. They don't have the pressure of, you know, the cameras being on or whatever. And Mike would always, every time I was there, like the second the cameras went off, he was gone. He was racking up.
He'd just leave.
He'd have all the chips in the room and he'd be racking up.
Yeah, he would just leave. And then that brings up the other thing too, which is, again, I said this right around tax time, which is really, really something. If I'll give you a scenario here, because this has been confirmed by many people, this is how a place will get shut down. And it just sort of goes to show you that maybe the people above Justin just weren't really paying attention at all. But I have heard from multiple different people, and this is what I tweeted out. I saw it with my own eyes several times too, but I also heard that this was commonplace, is that when Mike would cash out and when he would have over 10,000 in chips, he would structure his cash out, meaning that obviously, like if you cash more than, if you're ever being handed more than $10,000 in hard currency, right? You're supposed to get a CTR. CTR is not that big of a deal in itself. I've gotten many CTRs. So I actually sometimes intentionally get them because I want to make sure that, you know, because sometimes the burden is on you to file as a professional gambler. And I was like, okay, this is going to help you. Not a big deal. What is a big deal is if you structure an SAR, which is a suspicious activity report, which means that you are intentionally trying to get around a CTR. This is why the bike got shut down for one day a few years ago. They weren't doing the right CTRs. They were helping, like, I think it was their foreign player structure. Mike would structure, meaning that, like, he would go and if he had $14,000, he would give $6 or $7 grand to a waitress and then $6 or $7 grand to a chip runner.
Right.
And it was right in front of Justin. And then somebody told me, I don't remember, it was here, that like Justin knew that it was going on and he said, oh, everybody does that, which means he's totally clueless, because that is something that will get you shut down if you are allowing structuring underneath your nose.
Right. And here's something that you probably don't know. My daughter's mother is an executive in anti-money laundering, right? So she knows all of these tricks, and she would constantly warn me, like when I started playing, you know, bigger games, not to do this. Don't structure your bets. And I go, or structure your withdrawals. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, and she explained how all this works, how the filings work, how SARs are created, you know, and how this, just exactly what you said, could quickly shut down a room. So yeah, it's
well, I mean, I'm just saying that, like, apparently the state DOJ is the one that actually investigates gaming incidents. Like, they have somebody texted me this, like they have a wing where the California Gaming doesn't have an investigation body or an enforcement body. They use a part of California DOJ to do that. Obviously, this is not like going to be a huge priority for them, right? If it's California DOJ. But like I said, where you could really get these guys in trouble, though, is it's funny to me that you could basically report structuring like that. Say, hey, I know a guy that's structuring every single night, and it would be a lot easier to bust them for that than what they did here. You know?
Oh,
which
100%.
is basically cheat on a live stream.
Assuming you could get access to the video feeds and see that 30 feet away he just made $30,000 in a game, and yet at the cashier he cashed out for $5.
And it's
you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's not just that, Jamin. It's that the casino. It's not that he was just structuring as an individual. It's the casino is facilitating the structuring.
Yeah,
facilitating it. That's what would get you fucked. Would get you really, really in trouble if you're a casino.
Is it considered structuring if you don't cash out?
No. He's just structuring around But I mean, that's why I think that the higher ups didn't even really know what was going on, because there's no way that they would allow that to go on. Like, that's something that could get your license pulled immediately.
Yeah.
Why would they let Mike Postle do that? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, but under the same token, why would they let Justin let Mike Postle do that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, Justin through Mike. That's what I'm saying. Like, nobody knew what was going on there. Like, no one knew that that structuring was going on, you know, all the time. I mean, you could ask probably if somebody sees this live stream. I don't know if I'll cut it for later on. People that have done it for Mike before, right? You know, cocktail waitresses, chip runners, whatever.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that in saying that they probably were 100% clueless, and you know as well as I do that that live stream and everything that surrounded it was Justin's brainchild. Justin ran it. Justin was, you know, the point person for all of that stuff. So it wouldn't be too far fetched to say they didn't know anything about what was going on down there.
No, I just like, I mean, for what? Why would they put themselves at? That's why I'm not really
Right.
I'm not mad at Stones in the sense that I understand, like I'm talking about the higher ups that I know, like
Right.
I understand
Right.
they're in a bind. But
Right.
what really got me mad is that if Justin's still on their payroll or if they're not doing something about Justin. I mean, this is ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
so
yeah, it would seem at some point somebody from HR or somebody else would just like pull him aside and say, "Hey, just stay off of social media." I mean, but you know, it doesn't appear that that conversation has happened.
anyways, all right, I'm going to wrap it up.
But no, it's good talking to you, buddy.
Good talking to you too. Thank you,
All right,
Jamin.
talk to you later.